The birth of Prince Siddhartha on a beautiful day in the royal palace of the kingdom of Kapilavastu. The greatest joy came to King Suddhodana and Queen Maya of the birth of a child who would later change the world. That child was none other than Prince Siddhartha, whom we now call the Buddha, or Shakyamuni Buddha. The joy of his parents and the people of the kingdom was beyond words. Prophets had foretold that this child was no ordinary being, but would grow to become either a great saint or a mighty king who would bring transformation to all of humanity. On the day of Prince Siddhartha's birth, the entire kingdom was lavishly adorned. Flags fluttered in the breeze along the streets, and the sound of drums and music filled the air. People from all over the kingdom gathered to celebrate with the royal family. They wore their finest clothes and held festivals with traditional dances. The palace was filled with splendor and opulence, as if nature itself rejoiced at the arrival of an extraordinary being. Prince Siddhartha was born into a life that anyone would consider to be the epitome of happiness, power, wealth, and status. Born into a royal family, people believed that Siddhartha would grow up to rule the kingdom, bringing prosperity and peace to his subjects. However, prophetic signs that appeared at his birth hinted that his life would go beyond the ordinary duties of a king. One of the key events surrounding Prince Siddhartha's birth was the visit of the sage Asita, who made an important prediction. Asita, a wise hermit living in the forest, saw auspicious signs at the time of the prince's birth and decided to visit the palace to see the child. When he was brought to meet the young prince, Asita wept not out of sadness, but because he realized that Siddhartha would renounce royal life and become an enlightened being who would discover the truth of life. Queen Maya, who had endured many challenges to give birth to the prince, did not live long after his birth. She passed away only 7 days after giving birth to Siddhartha. Before departing from this world, she entrusted her sister, Mahapajapati, to care for the prince as her own. The queen's passing was not only a great loss for the royal family but also the first sign in the prince's life of the impermanence of all things. Though Prince Siddhartha was raised in the palace and surrounded by wealth, he never felt truly fulfilled. Questions about the meaning of life, about suffering and happiness, began to stir in his mind from a very young age. The image of Prince Siddhartha's life, even from birth, reveals that this was not just the story of a prince living in luxury, but the beginning of a journey to seek the truth and liberation for himself and all of humanity.
2. A royal life and the faithful encounters. Prince Siddhartha grew up in the opulence of the Kapilavastu palace, surrounded by wealth and the tender care of his royal family. His life was filled with every comfort and pleasure imaginable, preparing him for a future as a great king. However, despite this life of privilege, Siddhartha felt a sense of emptiness within him. He sensed that wealth and power could not bring true happiness. One day, as the prince had grown into adulthood, he asked for permission to leave the palace and see the world beyond its walls. This marked the first time that Siddhartha ventured beyond the confines of his royal life to witness the realities of the outside world. It was during this journey that he encountered for sights that would forever change his life. The first sight, Siddhartha saw an old man. The man's frail body, wrinkled skin, and slow gait vividly displayed the effects of time. Siddhartha had never seen old age before, and this sight made him realize that everyone, regardless of wealth or status, would eventually grow old. The second sight, he saw a sick man, writhing in pain. The prince came to understand that illness was another inescapable part of life, afflicting all without exception. The third sight, the most troubling sight of all, was a funeral procession. Siddhartha witnessed death for the first time and realized that every living being must face death at some point in life. The fourth sight. Finally, he saw an ascetic monk. Unlike the previous sights of suffering, this monk appeared serene, detached from the world's woes. Siddhartha realized that there must be a path that led away from the cycle of suffering and sorrow, a path of wisdom and peace. These encounters left a profound impression on Siddhartha's mind. He understood that the riches and privileges of palace life could not shield anyone from the inevitable realities of aging, illness, and death. Troubled by these realizations, Siddhartha began to question the meaning of life and the nature of suffering. His heart became restless as he pondered the larger questions. Why do people suffer? How can one escape suffering? His inner turmoil grew, and Siddhartha resolved that palace life could not offer him the answers he sought. He needed to leave and embark on a journey to discover the truth, to understand suffering and how to end it. 3. Renouncing the palace and the life of asceticism. After witnessing the harsh realities of life, Prince Siddhartha could no longer find peace in the comforts of the palace. Despite having a wife, Princess Yasodhara, and a son, Rahula, Siddhartha's heart was consumed with questions about suffering and the purpose of life. The wealth, power, and pleasures of palace life could no longer quell his desire to seek the truth. One quiet night, while everyone in the palace was asleep, Siddhartha made a fateful decision. He would leave behind his wife, son, and everything familiar to him to pursue the truth about existence. With a determined heart, he mounted his horse Embark, along with his loyal servant Chana, set off into the forest to begin the life of an ascetic god in the forest. Siddhartha encountered many sages and learned various spiritual practices from them. He studied under renowned teachers of the time, mastering their teachings on meditation and spiritual discipline. However, despite making significant progress in his practices, Siddhartha still felt that the truth he sought had not yet been found. Undeterred, Siddhartha continued his spiritual journey by adopting extreme asceticism. He subjected his body to severe deprivations, fasting to the point where he was nothing but skin and bones, enduring great physical pain in the hope of finding enlightenment. For 6 long years, Siddhartha lived in this state of extreme hardship, believing that such intense self-denial might lead him to the truth. Yet, despite his best efforts, Siddhartha could not achieve the liberation he sought through such extreme practices. Finally, he realized that the path of extreme asceticism was just as unproductive as a life of indulgence. This revelation led him to search for a new way, a path that avoided the extremes of both self-indulgence and self-denial. This was the beginning of his discovery of the middle way. 4. Enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. After abandoning the extreme ascetic practices, Siddhartha felt that neither the path of indulgence nor self-denial could lead to the ultimate truth. He realized that a balanced approach was needed, one that would avoid both extremes. This realization led him to the discovery of the middle way, a path of moderation that balances the material and spiritual aspects of life. Siddhartha, with renewed determination, arrived at a quiet spot along the banks of the Naranyara River. There, he found a large Bodhi tree, the tree of awakening. He decided to sit in meditation under its shade, vowing not to rise until he had uncovered the truth behind suffering and existence. As Siddhartha entered a deep state of meditation, the night sky began to darken, and the stars above twinkled gently. The cool breeze from the river rustled the leaves of the Bodhi tree. For 49 days, Siddhartha sat in stillness, undisturbed by the world around him, immersed in contemplation. During these 49 days, Siddhartha was confronted by Mara, the lord of desire and illusion. Mara, realizing that Siddhartha was close to enlightenment, sought to distract him. Mara summoned terrifying demons, threw violent storms at him, and even sent his beautiful daughters to tempt Siddhartha. But Siddhartha remained unmoved. His focus was unwavering, his heart filled with compassion and determination to discover the truth for the sake of all beings. Mara, in one final attempt, challenged Siddhartha's right to sit under the Bodhi tree and claim enlightenment. In response, Siddhartha touched the ground, calling upon the earth to witness his right to be there. The earth trembled in response, and Mara, defeated, vanished. As the full moon rose high in the sky, Siddhartha entered the final stage of meditation. In that moment, he experienced the profound realization of the Four Noble Truths and gained a complete understanding of the cycle of birth, suffering, death, and rebirth. He realized that the root of all suffering was desire, and that by following a path of ethical conduct, mental discipline, and wisdom, one could overcome suffering and reach nirvana. Siddhartha had attained enlightenment. From that day forward, he was no longer Siddhartha Gautama. He had become the Buddha, the awakened one, a being who had transcended the limitations of human suffering and attained perfect wisdom and compassion. 5. The first sermon. Turning the wheel of Dharma with enlightenment attained, Buddha felt a deep compassion for all living beings. He knew that the wisdom he had discovered could liberate people from the suffering of birth, death, and rebirth. But he also realized that the path he had discovered was difficult and might be hard for many to understand. At first, he wondered whether anyone would be able to grasp the depth of what he had learned. However, his compassion won over, and he resolved to share his teachings with those who were ready to listen. Buddha's first thought was to share his insight with the ascetics he had practiced with during his years of hardship. They had once abandoned him when he gave up extreme asceticism, but now he knew they would benefit from the truths he had discovered. He set out for Deer Park in Sarnath, where his former companions were living. As he walked, the beauty of the natural surroundings seemed to reflect his inner peace. The journey was long, but with each step, Buddha felt a growing sense of purpose. He was ready to teach. When he arrived at Deer Park, his former companions initially ridiculed him, but as they approached, they sensed the profound transformation within him. There was something about his presence calm, radiant, and wise that commanded their attention. They gathered around him, curious about what had changed in their friend. Sitting under the shade of a large tree, surrounded by lush greenery and the peaceful sounds of nature, Buddha began his first sermon. This moment would be known as the turning of the wheel of Dharma, a pivotal event in history. The words he spoke introduced the core of his teachings, the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path. Buddha explained to his audience the nature of suffering, its cause, and how it could be overcome. He shared how suffering arises from desire and attachment, and how, by letting go of these, one could attain peace and liberation. The monks, listening intently, began to understand the wisdom in his words, but it was more than just his teachings that moved them. As Buddha spoke, his voice was steady, filled with clarity and compassion. His presence itself was transformative. It wasn't merely the words he said, but the calm certainty and peaceful aura he radiated that inspired them. By the end of the sermon, all 5 ascetics had become his first disciples. They had not only understood his words, but had been touched deeply by the truth of his message. From that moment on, they committed themselves to following his path. This marked the beginning of the Sangha, the community of monks and followers who would carry Buddha's teachings forward. Buddha's teachings were simple yet profound. The Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path were universal guidelines, applicable to anyone seeking to understand the nature of existence and to free themselves from suffering. With each disciple he gained, Buddha's message began to spread, and the world slowly started to awaken to the wisdom of the Buddha. 6. The Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path for Noble Truths. These are the core principles that Buddha realized and became the foundation of his teachings. The truth of suffering dukkha, life is filled with suffering. Human existence is characterized by old age, sickness, death, and the inevitable disappointments of life. The truth of the cause of suffering samudaya. The cause of suffering is craving and attachment. People suffer because they desire and cling to impermanent things, leading to frustration when they lose them. The truth of the cessation of suffering nirvana. Suffering can be ended by letting go of attachment and desire. When one is free from clinging, they attain a state of peace known as nirvana. The truth of the path to the cessation of suffering magga. The way to end suffering and reach nirvana is through the Noble Eightfold Path. The Noble Eightfold Path. This is the path Buddha taught, consisting of 8 steps that guide people toward the cessation of suffering, right view, understanding the reality of life, particularly the Four Noble Truths, right intention, thinking free of selfish desires, ill will, and cruelty, right speech, speaking truthfully, kindly, and without gossip or slander, right action, behaving ethically, avoiding harm to living beings, stealing, or immoral conduct, right livelihood, earning a living in a way that does not harm others or contribute to suffering, right effort, diligently working to cultivate positive qualities and eliminate negative ones, right mindfulness, maintaining awareness of thoughts, emotions, and actions, right concentration, practicing meditation that leads to a calm, focused, and peaceful mind. By following the Noble Eightfold Path, one can gradually free themselves from suffering and achieve enlightenment, leading a life of peace and compassion. Each part of Buddha's life offers inspiration for those seeking meaning, understanding, and peace in their own lives. 7. The spread of teachings and preaching across lands. After delivering his first sermon on the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path at Deer Park, Buddha began a 45-year journey of spreading his teachings throughout northern India. For him, sharing the wisdom and the path to liberation was a mission to help people escape the cycle of suffering. Initially, the Buddha's former ascetic companions became his first disciples after listening to his sermon. They, too, played a vital role in spreading the Buddha's teachings. Together with the Buddha, they traveled from village to village, town to town, teaching people from all walks of life about the path to end suffering. From wealthy nobles to common people and even outcasts, Buddha's message of liberation resonated widely. One of the standout features of Buddha's mission was his emphasis on equality and non-discrimination. Despite the rigid caste system and social hierarchies in ancient India, Buddha opened his teachings to everyone, regardless of their background or status. This egalitarian approach attracted a large number of followers, who became disciples and adherents of his teachings. Additionally, Buddha met with and taught kings and rulers of various kingdoms. Kings like Bimbisara of Magadha and later King Ajat Ashatra were drawn to the Buddha's wisdom and compassion. These rulers played crucial roles in supporting Buddhism's growth and spreading the teachings within their kingdoms. Apart from teaching the general populace, Buddha also dedicated significant time to guiding monks and nuns. Monastic communities were established, following strict codes of conduct to maintain purity and wisdom in their practice. After receiving Buddha's guidance, these monks traveled to spread the teachings, further expanding Buddhism's influence and reach. 8. Nirvana and the passing of the Buddha. After 45 years of sharing his wisdom, at the age of 80, Buddha sensed that his time on earth was nearing its end. Despite his advanced age, Buddha continued to teach and guide his disciples until his health could no longer sustain him. But in his final days, Buddha and his disciples stopped at the city of Kusinara, now known as Kushinagar. Before his passing, Buddha offered his last teaching, reminding his followers of life's impermanence. All things are subject to decay. Strive diligently to attain your own liberation. Buddha then laid down between two sala trees and entered parinirvana, a state of complete liberation from the cycle of birth, death, and suffering. His passing was not the end of a life, but the symbol of the ultimate cessation of suffering and freedom from all worldly attachments. Buddha left behind an invaluable legacy, the teachings of the Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, and the path to attaining freedom from suffering. These lessons were not just relevant in his time, but have served as a guiding light for generations, helping countless individuals find peace and enlightenment in their lives. The life of Buddha Shakyamuni, an inspiring example of courage, wisdom, and compassion. From a royal prince to an enlightened being, he demonstrated that true happiness and liberation are found not in material wealth, but in deep understanding and self-realization. Happiness is not found in material wealth. Despite being born into royalty, Buddha renounced everything to seek the path of liberation for himself and humanity. This teaches us that material wealth alone cannot bring true fulfillment. Suffering is a part of life. Buddha's life showed that suffering is inevitable, but through understanding and practice, one can transcend suffering and achieve peace and liberation. The middle way, by avoiding extremes. Buddha chose the middle path, a balanced approach to life, which led to his enlightenment. This is a valuable lesson in maintaining balance between material and spiritual life, perseverance and determination. Buddha's journey to enlightenment was not easy. From leaving the palace to enduring years of asceticism, Buddha demonstrated that persistence and effort are essential to achieving success and enlightenment.